Walk out to your tomato bed tomorrow morning and look at the lower leaves. Specifically, check the older ones near the bottom of the plant. If you notice something strange, yellow fading in between the veins while the veins themselves stay dark green, stop right there. That is not heat damage, that is not old age, and that is not some mysterious disease. That is your tomato plant calling out in the only language it has for one specific mineral. The $40 bottle in the garage will not fix it. The shiny bag of tomato food with the cartoon tomato on the label will not fix it. However, a plain white powder sitting on the bottom shelf of every pharmacy in America for $2 can turn those leaves dark green again in less than a week. And here is the part that should make you angry, or at least curious. The reason you have never heard this from a single garden center employee in your life has almost nothing to do with science and almost everything to do with what can be put on a label and trademarked. Pull up a chair. The yellowing pattern between the veins has a name. Botanists call it intervenal chlorosis. Once you see it the first time, you cannot unsee it. You will spot it in your own beds, in your neighbor's roses, in the citrus trees at the grocery store parking lot. It is everywhere. Here is the part most people miss. It almost always starts on the older leaves first, the ones near the soil. The veins themselves hold their color almost stubbornly, while the tissue in between turns this pale, sickly yellow. Sometimes the edges go brown. The plant keeps growing upward like nothing is wrong, but the lower canopy slowly thins out. Tomatoes come in smaller, peppers set fewer fruits, and roses push out thinner canes and fewer blooms. By the time the top leaves start turning yellow too, your whole season is already in trouble. Dr. Neil Matson at Cornell University puts it about as plainly as anyone can. If the older leaves are yellowing between the veins while the veins stay green, the plant is short in magnesium. If all the leaves are yellowing at the same time from top to bottom, the plant is short on sulfur. Either way, the missing nutrient is not in that famous trio everyone talks about. Not nitrogen, not phosphorus, and not potassium. None of the three that fill the bright bags lining every garden center wall. The deficiency is in two quiet minerals almost no commercial fertilizer puts back in any meaningful amount. And if you have been gardening the same plot for 10, 20, or 30 years, that matters more to you than to almost anyone else. Think about what has actually happened in your soil over those decades. Tomatoes coming out every August, peppers every September, compost going in when you have time, and the same blue liquid feed going on when the bottle is on sale. Year after year after year, magnesium and sulfur leave the soil through every harvest you pull out, while the bagged fertilizer keeps pouring only the same three macronutrients back in. At some point, the math stops working. Your soil ends up rich in nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, and nearly bankrupt of the two minerals that actually run the engine. Your plants do not die, they just stop performing the way they used to, and you stand there scratching your head wondering what on earth happened to the beautiful garden you had 10 years ago. The thing is, nobody tells you. They sell you a more expensive bottle of the wrong thing instead. Let me show you the missing piece. The story starts in a drought 400 years ago, and it has one of the strangest origins of any garden secret you have ever heard. In Surrey, England, in 1618, the summer was brutal. Surrey, the county just southwest of London, had gone weeks without real rain. The pastures cracked open, the streams shrank to trickles, and the cattle got thin and irritable. A farmer named Henry Wicker was walking his herd across a common field outside the small market town of Epsom when he noticed something he could not explain. There was a small natural spring still flowing in the middle of the dry field, and his cattle, half dying of thirst, kept refusing to drink from it. Curious, Wicker bent down and tasted the water himself. It was sharp, bitter, and almost medicinal. He understood why the cows wanted nothing to do with it, but that is not what stopped him in his tracks. The truly strange thing was the grass. Everywhere else in that field, the ground was brown and brittle, but within a few feet of that bitter spring, in the middle of the worst drought anyone could remember, the grass was thick, deep green, and standing tall. Wicker did what any sensible farmer of his era would do. He took the water to the local apothecary, who boiled it down until small white crystals settled at the bottom of the pan. The substance turned out to be a salt of two minerals, magnesium and sulfur. The town gave it its name, and Epsom salt entered the historical record. Within one generation, farmers across Surrey and Kent were dissolving the crystals in well water and applying them to their wheat and barley fields before planting. The reports passed along the country lanes were strikingly consistent. Seeds came up faster, roots ran deeper, leaves got darker, and yields climbed. The wisdom traveled by word of mouth through generations of English smallholders, crossed the Atlantic with the colonists, found its way into American kitchen gardens by the late 1700s, and became a quiet fixture of country gardening for the next 200 years. But nobody could explain why it actually worked. The chemists of 1618 simply did not have the tools. It would take another 3 centuries and a brilliant chemist working in a laboratory in Berlin on the eve of the First World War to finally crack the secret. And when he did, it earned him the Nobel Prize. Here is the story almost no gardener has ever heard. In 1817, 2 French chemists named Joseph Pelletier and Joseph Caventou isolated the green pigment that gives every leaf its color. They named it chlorophyll, from the Greek words for green and leaf. For nearly 90 years after that, nobody could fully explain what the molecule was actually made of. Then in 1906, a careful chemical analysis turned up something nobody expected. Locked inside every chlorophyll molecule was one single atom of magnesium. Most chemists at the time assumed it had to be a mistake, a contamination from the laboratory glassware. Magnesium had no business sitting at the heart of a green plant pigment. The samples must be impure. The man who proved them all wrong was a German chemist named Richard Willstetter, working at the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute. Through years of painstaking work, extractions, purifications, and recrystallizations, Willstetter showed that magnesium was not a contaminant at all. It was the structural keystone of the chlorophyll molecule itself, held in place by 4 nitrogen atoms in a precise geometry, almost identical to the way iron sits inside human hemoglobin. In 1915, the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences awarded him the Nobel Prize in Chemistry for the discovery. Think about what that actually means for your garden. Without magnesium, chlorophyll cannot exist in its working form. Without working chlorophyll, photosynthesis cannot happen. Without photosynthesis, the plant cannot make sugars. Without sugars, it cannot build cell walls, cannot set fruit, and cannot push out flowers. Your tomato plant can be drowning in nitrogen, swimming in phosphorus, and showered with potassium, and still slowly fade from the bottom up if its magnesium runs short. The whole engine just starts misfiring. And sulfur, that second mineral in Epsom salt, does something completely different but just as important. Sulfur switches on the enzymes that turn nitrogen into amino acids, and amino acids are what every plant protein is built from. Imagine bags of groceries sitting on your front porch. Nitrogen is the groceries. Sulfur is the key to the front door. Without sulfur, the groceries just sit there. The plant cannot use them. So that bitter spring at Epsom 400 years ago was not delivering some vague mystical tonic. It was delivering in pure mineral form the 2 exact atoms a green plant needs to run its engine. Henry Wicker did not know any of this in 1618, and the cows did not know it either. The grass simply turned dark green and stood tall in the middle of the drought because the 2 minerals it had been starved of were finally, suddenly available. Once you understand that, you understand why a $2 bag of Epsom salt can do something a $40 bottle of branded fertilizer cannot. The branded fertilizer is feeding the plant more of what it already has. The Epsom salt is giving it what it has actually been missing. Before going any further, here's something to make this easier for you. Everything you are about to hear, the exact dosages for tomatoes, peppers, roses, citrus, and azaleas, the 3 application schedule for the early growing season, the soil test cheat sheet that tells you whether your garden actually needs this, and the printable monthly calendar you can stick on the fridge, all of it has been put together as one detailed PDF blueprint. It is free with no email sign up and no catch. If you look at the bottom right corner of the screen right now, you will see a QR code. Just open the camera app on your phone, point it at the code, and tap the link that pops up. The PDF will download straight to your phone or tablet, ready to print whenever you want. Print it out, take it to the garden with you, and tape it inside the door of the garden shed. That way, you do not have to remember everything from this video. Now back to the garden, because the next part is where this gets practical. This is the part most videos rush through. Take your time with this section because the difference between Epsom salt that transforms a garden and Epsom salt that does nothing comes down to a few small details most people get wrong. First, where to buy it. Skip the garden center entirely. Walk into any pharmacy or grocery store and look for a plain 10-pound bag labeled magnesium sulfate USP grade. Check the ingredient list. It should say magnesium sulfate and absolutely nothing else. No lavender, no eucalyptus, and no soothing scents. Those additives are fine for a foot soak, but will burn plant tissue. A plain 10-pound bag runs about $8 and will last most home gardens an entire growing season. There are two ways to apply it. Both work, and they work best when you use them together. The first is the foliar spray. This is the fast-acting one. Dissolve 1 level teaspoon of Epsom salt into 1 gallon of room temperature water. Stir until the water runs clear and you cannot see any crystals at the bottom. Pour it into a clean spray bottle or a hand pump pressure sprayer. Now here is where timing matters. Spray in the early morning before the sun gets high or in the cool of the evening after sundown. Never under the midday sun. Wet leaves under direct sun will scorch. Mist the tops and the undersides of the leaves until they are lightly coated, not dripping wet. The magnesium absorbs straight through the leaf surface. Within a few hours on a tomato plant or pepper plant showing that yellow intervenal pattern, you will see the regreening start in 5 to 7 days. The second method is the root drench. This is the slower, deeper one. Dissolve 1 tablespoon of Epsom salt, 3 times the foliar amount, into 1 gallon of water. Pour it at the base of the plant right where the stem meets the soil. Do this once a month for heavy feeders during early growth and once every 2 weeks once the flowers come in. The minerals soak down into the root zone slowly and stay available for the plant for the next 10 to 14 days. For tomatoes, and listen carefully here because this is the schedule that actually moves the needle. Apply the foliar spray 3 times during the early season. The first time is when you transplant the seedling into the bed. The second time is when the first flowers open. The third time is when the early tomatoes are about the size of a marble. 3 applications are enough to carry most tomato plants through a full harvest, even in tired soil. For roses, there is a method that has been passed around the master gardener community for decades, and it comes from Linda Cobb, a longtime master gardener and television garden host in Spartanburg, South Carolina. In early spring, just as the canes break dormancy, scratch about half a cup of dry Epsom salt into the soil around the base of each established rose bush. The spring rains will slowly release the minerals into the root zone. Linda Cobb's roses, by the way, are the kind that make tourists pull their cars over. For peppers, follow the National Gardening Association protocol. 1 tablespoon per gallon as a foliar spray at first bloom, then a second application 10 days later. That is it. More frequent spraying does not produce bigger peppers. The studies are clear on this. There is a ceiling, and going past it produces no extra benefit. For citrus trees in containers, and if you have a lemon tree on the back porch, you know exactly what I mean. Magnesium leaks out of those drainage holes every single time you water. A monthly root drench at 1 tablespoon per gallon prevents the yellow leaf problem that frustrates so many backyard citrus growers. One more rule that matters more than any of the others: 2 teaspoons in a gallon do not work twice as well as 1. Excess magnesium starts blocking calcium and other nutrients from getting into the plant. You start solving one problem and creating 2 new ones. Stick with the doses above. They are what 400 years of practical use and a century of laboratory work have settled on. Now for the honest part. There are 3 things floating around the internet about Epsom salt that are flat wrong, and if you act on them, you will hurt your garden instead of helping it. First, and this one is everywhere, Epsom salt does not cure blossom end rot in tomatoes. You know the problem. The bottom of the tomato turns dark and sunken, ruining what would have been a beautiful fruit. Half the gardening forums on the internet will tell you to grab the Epsom salt. They are wrong. Blossom end rot is caused by a calcium shortage, not a magnesium one. And here's the brutal part. Because magnesium and calcium compete for the same uptake pathways in the plant's roots, adding more magnesium to a calcium-starved plant actually makes the rot worse, not better. If you see blossom end rot, The answer is consistent watering and a calcium source like crushed eggshells worked into the soil, gypsum, or bone meal. Not Epsom salt, never Epsom salt. Second, Epsom salt does not speed up seed germination. Healthy seeds carry their own internal mineral reserves. They sprout with nothing but water and warmth. Soaking seeds in Epsom salt solution does not help, and in concentrated doses, it actually slows germination down by pulling water away from the seed coat. Third, and this is the one that hurts to say, if your soil already has enough magnesium and sulfur, Epsom salt will do nothing measurable for your garden. Studies at Auburn University and at Delaware Valley College have made this clear. Dr. Linda Chalker-Scott at Washington State University has been pointing this out for years. Epsom salt reverses a deficiency. Where there is no deficiency, there is nothing to reverse. So before you go to the pharmacy, take $15 and a soil sample to your county extension office. Every county in the United States has one. That is what your tax dollars pay for. They will test your soil and tell you in writing exactly which minerals you are short on. That $15 test is the smartest gardening investment you can make in your entire year. If the report comes back showing low magnesium, this information just paid for itself 10 times over. If it comes back showing magnesium is fine, you have saved yourself from chasing a problem you do not have. That is what trustworthy gardening advice sounds like. Not this miracle works on everything, but here is what it actually does. Here is when it works, and here is how to know if it applies to you. So here is the question worth ending on. If Henry Wicker stumbled onto this in 1618, and Richard Willstetter won a Nobel Prize explaining it in 1915, and the National Gardening Association has been testing it for decades, why is this not on every garden center shelf in America? Why are you hearing it for the first time from a stranger? The answer is not a conspiracy. It is simpler than that, and honestly, more interesting. After the Second World War ended, the United States government found itself with 10 massive ammonium nitrate plants, including the famous Muscle Shoals facility in Alabama, built originally to manufacture munitions for the war effort. In 1947, those plants converted from making explosives to making fertilizer. The output was nitrogen-based, the manufacturing processes were proprietary, and the products could be branded. A company could put its own name on a particular ratio of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, register a trademark, buy magazine ads, and pay for 30-second television commercials. The product had a moat around it. Magnesium sulfate is the exact opposite of all that. It is a pure mineral compound, identical no matter who puts it in the bag. There is nothing to patent, nothing to trademark. No marketing department on earth wants to spend a single dollar promoting a product that every competitor sells for exactly the same price. So the marketing dollars went where the marketing dollars could earn a return. The bright bottles and the branded blends took the front shelves. The plain white pharmacy salt, the actual cure for the actual problem most home gardens have, stayed quietly in the back of the store. 2 generations of American gardeners walked right past it on their way to spend $40 on something that does not address what their soil is actually missing. That is not suppression, that is just how money flows. But knowing how money flows is what lets you walk into the pharmacy this weekend, pay $2 and step around the entire game. 400 years ago, a thirsty cow refused a bitter drink, and a quiet English farmer paid attention to a patch of dark green grass. 300 years later, a German chemist proved exactly why that grass was so green and won a Nobel Prize for the work. And tonight, at your kitchen table, the same plain mineral they were both looking at is sitting on the pharmacy shelf 2 miles from your front door, available for the price of a sandwich. The garden has always been patient. It has been waiting for you to notice. So this weekend, before the next bag of branded fertilizer goes into your cart, take a slow walk through your beds. Check those lower tomato leaves, look at the rose canes, and ask the simple question, is the engine running on empty? If the answer is yes, you now know exactly what to do. If this story changed the way you look at the simple things in your garden, please subscribe and like the video. We are digging up the history and science that often gets buried under marketing. Let's grow a better future together. Our next deep dive into the secrets of the soil will be opening soon.